It's lovely to be with this group today. Thank you for joining us. It's a joy and a privilege to have community in these times. Not everyone is able to have community, and we're blessed, and I know I'm personally grateful to be with you and with such a loving community. I think that's part of why I wanted to talk about today's topic, which is loving kindness practice, or metta. This has been a substantial portion of my practice in recent years. It's been something I've been trying to include into my meditation diet, as it were, for the last couple of years. Not the main course, but something on the side, tasty side dish, some loving kindness. And I found it to be an extremely useful component of a well-balanced meal, to have some compassion for self and compassion for others. So I thought I would share that with all of you today. We'll be doing about an hour of compassion practice. It seems each time that I teach this technique, I teach it quite differently depending on my mood. And I've seen this taught a number of different ways. People teach it a lot of different ways, but I'd say that there's one element in common to all of the loving kindness, compassion practice that I've seen, which is the body. Soryu likes to say that meditation happens in the body, and this is also true for loving kindness, metta practice. It's something that ultimately we do in the body. We want to generate feelings of goodwill, of love, of compassion in the body, sometimes around the mouth with, say, a smile, or in the heart, in the emotional heart. Certainly in other parts of the body, you can feel it pulsing through your whole body if you allow the fire to take flames. But that's a process for most of us. It's not easy to let that fire blaze to begin. So we often start with using our minds. We start with our minds, and we aim for ultimately letting the loving kindness practice take root in the body. And that can take typically two forms. You can use mental talk using different phrases like, I love you, I care about you, may you be happy. There's a number of phrases. The way that I first practiced it, I used 4 phrases. May you be safe and healthy, may you be free from ill will, may you be full of loving kindness, may you be truly happy. Those are standard phrases that you can use. I've also used I love you. I've used, I really like to use lots of different phrases that are spontaneous and appropriate to specific relationships that I have. Thank you for helping me today. I really appreciate it. It's good to know that I can trust you, for example. That's spontaneous. It's not planned on, and it's a phrase that has an emotional response for me. So that can be really lovely, to consider different people and say a phrase that feels authentic in that moment. I hope my father's health as well. May his health continue to be good, and may he have a lovely weekend, for example, if I was thinking of my father. Different for different people, of course. But you can also use the same phrase over and over again. I love you. 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 That also works. Saying I love you over and over again. Each time that you say it, it can grow in power, take on significance. Those are good ways to do it, using mental talk, the same phrase, different phrases. It's all good, as Shinzen says. But you can also use images. You can use any number of images. You can use, in a similar way, the same image over and over again, or you can use lots of different images. I like to picture people being happy, seeing my father, for example, be happy in different situations, remembering memories that we've had together or something like that, that without fail will bring that kind of happiness and joy and warmth into my heart. So that works quite well. You can also imagine, say, a sunny day or flowers bursting or any kind of imagery that brings joy into your heart. It could be anything. For me, it's nice to use people being happy, real memories, imagined memories, but anything will do. You can get very creative. So typically people teach it in a stock formulaic way that you do this and then this and then this, use this phrase and this phrase and this phrase, but it turns out that's not so important. It really doesn't matter, and it can be helpful to be playful, to try lots of different things, to be creative and experimental as you go about learning how to do loving kindness practice. The goal is to discern which kinds of mental activities, whether it's talk or images or both, tends to create these emotional responses in your body. And that can take a while. It can take a while to get those pathways activated, to learn the habits of feeling these feelings in our body. There can be a lot of obstacles to it, in fact. Many of us are disconnected from our emotional bodies. Many of us have very strong negative emotions like anger, sadness, grief, that can be obstacles to finding that deep compassion and joy. It's not easy. For me, I know I took many months of doing this practice before I started to reliably be able to feel into my heart and generate these feelings of goodwill and love for myself and others. And even now, if I'm angry or sad or frustrated or confused, that can be difficult, and I have to work with that before it's possible to let those good feelings flow again. But it is possible, and this practice, doing it again and again, over and over, is the way forward to that goal. Sometimes it seems boring, it seems dull, we're going through the motions. Teachers that I like talk about it as planting seeds. It's helpful to think about it in this light, that you're planting a very small seed into fertile soil, and it will take a little while. It takes a little while for it to grow. You have to nurture it. You have to add water and sunlight, care, remove weeds, things like this. And you also have to wait a while. You have to be patient. So in the beginning, it can be boring to plant these seeds. It can be even excruciatingly boring. You're just saying, I love you. I love you. Oh, nothing happened. Love you. Falling asleep, getting angry, whatever, all kinds of things can come up. It can just be boring. You're saying, I love you, over and over again, to yourself and others, and it seems like not much is happening. But in the same way, if we were to plant a seed in this garden, it might take a little while for it to rise up and become a flower or a plant, vegetable, a bush, something like this. It can take a while for these seeds of images and talk in our minds to take root in the body, for that to connect from here to here. That takes time, and it's okay. Maybe we'll do some loving kindness practice today and it'll be boring for you. It'll seem like not much is happening. That's okay. Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Really doesn't. The claim is that if you practice it again and again, over and over, that something will happen. It does happen. It changes how you feel your emotional body. It changes how you perceive yourself and relate to yourself. It changes how you perceive others and relate to them. I know for myself at this point, if I think even a small thought of compassion for someone else, that significantly alters how I interact with them. Maybe I've been annoyed at them or irritated at them, overly focused on a flaw that they have or a mistake that they made or something like that. And then I remember, this is also a being that deserves love. This is also a being that wants to be happy, that should be happy. I want to be happy. They also want to be happy. And by remembering that and wishing that they might find that, it becomes possible to see them in a new light, to no longer be stuck on, they did this, they did that, they're like this, they're like that, and just see them as they are, which is someone who wants to be happy. Of course, they still have flaws and imperfections. They've made the choices that they've made. It doesn't erase that, but it makes it easier to treat them in a kind way, to perceive them in a kind way. So, loving kindness has a number of benefits. Has benefits for ourselves, of course. Traditionally, in classical Buddhism, there are said to be 11 benefits of loving kindness practice. Things like it's easier to go to sleep, it's easier to wake up. They say other people will love you. They say that devas and celestial beings will love you and care about you. Things like this. That's an interesting list to look at, these 11 benefits. You can find it online after this talk if you like. But it turns out actually that contemporary science is finding similar benefits. We're doing psychological research on meditation and mindfulness, of course. That's an increasing movement, and there are some people that are focusing on the psychological effects and benefits of this practice that we'll be doing today, of love and kindness and compassion. And it's interesting because contemporary science, psychological research, corroborates many of the traditional benefits that were said to come from loving kindness practice. Things like, of course, that it's easier to feel compassion, that you can regulate your emotions more easily, feel less stress. It's also interesting, people seem to be more inclined to serve others, to act in a helpful way. They devise experiments with how helpful people are, and the people in the groups that do loving kindness practice tend to be more helpful than the people that do other kinds of practice or whatever the control groups do. And there are a number of other benefits that you can find, and it's interesting that Buddhism says, hey, this is good for you. There are these 11 traditional benefits. And then contemporary science says, hey, this is good for you. And it's interesting because you can sort of draw lines between them. Some of them match, more compassion, for example, more ease of, less stress and so on. And then science says some things that Buddhism didn't say traditionally, and Buddhism says some things that science doesn't say. Devas will love you and so on. But either way, whether you're listening to Buddhism or to science, they agree. This practice, loving kindness, is of benefit to you. So if you resonate with one of those ways of looking at the world more than the other, then just know, good news, what we're going to do today is great for you. You don't necessarily have to pay attention to the other thing if it's not interesting to you. Everybody agrees. This is excellent for you. But even more importantly than the benefit that we find ourselves from loving kindness practice, there's a benefit that I would say is even greater than this. Even greater, more needed, you could say. And what is this benefit? There was a period of my own training where I made the decision to intensively focus on this technique, loving kindness practice. I set aside something like 2 or 3 months to do this exclusively as my meditation practice. And since then, as I say, it's been a part of my diet of practice. But for a while I said, I really want to focus on this. I need this in my life and want to see what comes when I focus intensely on loving kindness. And shortly after that, I had an interview with my teacher, the founder of this organization, Soryu for All, and I was discussing what it was like for me to do loving kindness practice. I said, I start, as you often do, with sending love and compassion to myself, caring for myself, speaking to myself in kind ways, and so on. Then I would direct it to others, family and friends, acquaintances, even enemies. That's sort of the traditional order that you go through. You go through yourself, and then say close loved ones like family and friends or spiritual teachers, and then you go to acquaintances, people that you don't know very well but are just sort of neutral in your life, and then you go to people that are quite difficult for you, maybe that have hurt you or that it's hard for you to love. And then he said something that took me by surprise. I don't remember quite how he put it, but he said something like, well, that's good, but what about compassion for all life? What about compassion for all life? Are you giving rise to compassion for all life? Of course, that's what his name means, for all. He is someone who claims to be living for the benefit of all life. So of course he would say something like that. But it took me by surprise. I hadn't been thinking of all life. I'd been thinking of myself and humans that I knew. Humans that I knew. Maybe I liked them, maybe I didn't, but I wasn't thinking of all life. I wasn't even thinking of all humans. I was just thinking of particular humans. And this is a bias, I would say. It's a bias that we might call speciesism. Speciesism. This is, as far as I can tell, rampant in our minds and our current culture at this time. We are incredibly biased towards human beings. We believe that man is the measure of all things, that humans are the ultimate purpose of life. And not only, I would say, and this is just me, feel free to disagree with me, but I would say not only is this arrogant, it's incorrect. It's incorrect. And this view that humans are the most important thing in the world is destroying life on Earth. It's destroying other species. We're causing other species to go extinct. And we're also putting the whole planet at risk. We're causing vast environmental degradation because we believe that our comfort, our life, our civilization is more important than this planet. You might not easily find someone who would say it this bluntly, but we are saying it with our choices, with our actions, with our way of life. We're saying, we humans, me, my comfort as a human is more important than other life on this planet. And not only is this cruel, it's extremely cruel, but it's also stupidly suicidal. It's stupid that we do this. It's bad, and it could kill us. It could cause us to go extinct. This species, humans, that we value so much. And in that way, you could even say it's hypocritical. It's hypocritical that we would go to such lengths to care only about ourselves, to only care about humans, to only care about our own comfort. Earlier this year, I spent a significant amount of time in our cabins in solitary retreat on our property in Lowell. And this was a very significant period of my life for many reasons, but one of the transitions that I saw happen in my own mind related to this point. Most of my life I've spent inside in buildings like this, and in the last 2 decades, I'd say much of it has been looking at computer screens. I like computers quite a bit. I learn from them. I do interesting things on them. I meet interesting people. It's been enjoyable for me to, for example, use the internet. And yet that has closed me off from this world, from this vast life on this planet, looking at a screen of our own fabrication, a world that we create that's different from, separated from the life that we see outside these windows. And so there I was, living in a cabin in the woods in rural Vermont. Not exactly outside, but not in a building that's sort of insulated and heated a normal way. There's no air conditioning, there's no running water. It was about as close to outside as you can get without being outside. And of course, I spent quite a bit of time outside. When I went into the cabin, it was winter, and then by the time I came out, it was spring, and then later, early summer, I did 2 stints in the cabins there. But I watched over that time period, not only did the seasons change, but the way that I related to the life outside that I would go for walks in and so on changed. The way that I perceived the trees and the birds and the bushes and the sticks and leaves on the road changed. There was nothing I really expected when I started meditating that I would start to, at some subconscious level, I expected that I would see things differently, like shining lights or, glowing beings or something. And that kind of thing happens sometimes, but mostly not so much in my experience so far. Mostly it's just increasingly normal and increasingly ordinary. So in the same way, these leaves outside that we see outside now, they look the same to me now as before I went in the cabin. And yet the way that I perceive them is dramatically different. How to describe it? They look the same. Green and red, and golden light coming down. And yet, I guess you could say there's a respect there. I think that's how I'd put it. There's a respect there. Before I saw colors, shapes that I sort of glossed over. Oh yeah, those are the leaves over there. There's kind of this attitude. And yet, now I look and I say, there's life there. There's something that matters. Something that's worthy of respect that I want to greet and say hello to with my awareness. It's tricky to describe. I'm not entirely satisfied with how I'm describing it to you now, but there's been a shift from ignoring it, letting it gloss over, slide through my experience to, oh my God, there's leaves out there. There's trees, there's birds. This respect, this care, this attention. Noticing that this life, these leaves, these trees, all of the nature that we see is just as precious as my own life. Not less precious, not more precious, but it's life and it's precious. This is a shift that happened for me, of course, living outside for tens of days, but it's something that we can cultivate ourselves, whatever our living situation is. And in particular, I would claim that this practice that we'll be doing today, loving kindness, compassion, is a means to making this kind of shift. We can notice, oh yes, I am a being and I wish to be happy and I deserve that happiness. I deserve that love. We can see that clearly. We can extend that to others. We can wish it for our close family members and friends, the people that we care about. We can even see it in others, people that we don't know very well, people that are just acquaintances. We can even extend that same love to people that are difficult for us, people that we find challenging. And from there, from that point, we're even willing to wish love on those that have hurt us, that have harmed us. From there, it becomes possible to extend it even further past the human realm, towards other species and indeed towards all life. That becomes possible, and it's a thing that we can cultivate. We can cultivate this view that all life deserves love, that all life deserves happiness, care. And I would say that that is the view that heals the wounds that we are inflicting upon the world today. We are hurting the world with our view that humans are all that matter. And we can heal the world with a view that all life matters. All life matters, not just human lives, but also the plants and the animals, the trees, the whole dancing ecosystem that feeds us, holds us, lets us live, and lets us die. That is a skill that we can cultivate, seeing this perspective, and it's one that needs to be cultivated at this time. It's something that's needed now. This story, this view that all life matters, not just humans, not just the people that we know, but all life.